Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club, Financial Edition, and today we're continuing our reading of The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And this will be chapter 15, and this is part 2. Okay, I hope you guys are enjoying this reading. I certainly like the history part. It's very, very interesting. Okay, I'm going to move the camera in a little bit. If you have a book, you can follow with us there. If not, you can follow with us here on the screen. Oops. And in the meantime, check out our other book clubs. We have our spiritual book clubs on Mondays, every Monday, and then our health book clubs every Wednesday. And of course, our financial book clubs on Thursdays. And incidentally, we're starting a new book, a new spiritual book and a new health book in a couple of weeks. So join us there. Check them out on our website. We also have monthly newsletters you can check out, as well as podcasts. I interview some very interesting people. In my opinion, I think they're interesting. But anyways, also check out our merch. And if you're in the local area in Los Angeles, check out our healing center and our scalar technology. Okay, let's do it. The origin of the dollar. At the time of these deliberations, Spanish silver coins, called pieces of eight, had already become the de facto monetary unit. An official commission had been established by the Continental Congress to sample the circulating coins in the country and determine their average value by weight and purity. Charts were published, and all coins of various origin were listed by comparative value. Congress was already, quote, regulating the value of the nation's money by the time the Constitution was drafted. How these coins became dollars is an interesting story. Edward Vieira tells us, quote, monetary historians generally first associate the dollar with one Count Schlick, interesting name, Schlick, who began striking such silver coins in 1519 in Joachimsthal, Bavaria, then called Schlichtenthalers or Joachimthalers. The coins became simply known as thalers, which transliterated into dollars. Interestingly, the American colonies did not adopt the dollar from England, but from Spain. Under that country's monetary reform of 1497, the silver real became the Spanish monetary unit, or unit of account. A new coin consisting of 8 reales also appeared, variously known as pesos, duros, piezas de ocho, pieces of 8, or Spanish dollars because of their similarity in weight and fineness, to their thaler. The coins quickly achieved predominance in financial markets of the New World because of Spain's then important commercial and political position. And that quote was from Vieira, page 66. On July 6th, oh, sorry, skipped a whole paragraph there. My goodness. Okay. In 1785, Thomas Jefferson urged the adoption of the Spanish silver dollar as the nation's official monetary unit. In a pamphlet submitted to the delegates of the Continental Congress, he said, taking into our view all money transactions, great and small, I question if a common measure of more convenient size than the dollar could be proposed. The unit or dollar is a known coin and the most familiar of all to the minds of people. It is already adopted from south to north, has identified our currency, and therefore happily offers itself as a unit already introduced. And that quote was from Propositions Respecting the Coinage of Gold, Silver, and Copper, printed pamphlet presented to the Continental Congress on May 13, 1785, page 9 to 10, cited by Vieira, page 68. On July 6, 1785, Congress unanimously voted to adopt the silver dollar as the official monetary unit of the United States. Jefferson realized, however, that this was not sufficient. Although the coin had been one of the most dependable in terms of weight and quality, it still varied in content between issues, and a way had to be found to rate one coin in value against another. That was, after all, the service that Congress was required to render when it was given the power to, quote, regulate the value of money. Jefferson came directly to the point when he said, quote, if we determine that a dollar shall be our unit, we must then say with precision what a dollar is. This coin, as struck at different times of different weight and fineness, is of different values. And that quote was from IBIT, page 11. The logic voiced by Jefferson could not be ignored. 2 years later, after carefully examining the actual weight and fineness of the Spanish dollars currently in circulation, Congress defined the dollar. After ratification of the Constitution, a dollar would contain 371.25 grains of fine silver, and all items in commerce, including other coins, were to be measured in value against that standard. As the Spaniards continued to reduce the silver content of their coins, the pressure for the minting of an American dollar of predictable value began to mount. Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton, in his 1791 report to Congress, urged the establishment of a federal mint and also presented a powerful case for maintaining an inviolable standard for the coins to be produced by that mint. He said, quote, the dollar originally contemplated in the money transactions of this country by successive diminutions of its weight and fineness has sustained a depreciation of 5%, and yet the new dollar has a currency in all payments in place of the old, with scarcely any attention to the difference between them. The operation of this in depreciating the value of property depending upon past contracts and of all other property is apparent. Nor can it require argument to prove that a nation ought not to suffer the value of the property of its citizens to fluctuate with the fluctuations of a foreign mint, or to change with the changes in the regulations of a foreign sovereign. The quantity of gold and silver in the national coins corresponding with the given sum cannot be made less than heretofore without disturbing the balance of intrinsic value. Oh, excuse me. Let's try that again. The quantity of gold and silver in the national coins corresponding with a given sum cannot be made less than heretofore without disturbing the balance of intrinsic value, and making every acre of land as well as every bushel of wheat of less actual worth than in time past. This could not fail to distract the ideas of the community and would be apt to breed discontent as well among those who live on the income of their money as among the poorer classes of the people to whom the necessities of life would become dearer. And that quote was from the Debates and Proceedings in the Congress of the United States. J. Gale's compilation, right? 1834 appendix, page 2059 and 2071 to 2073, cited by Vieira, page 95 and 97. Bimetallism. Note in the preceding quotation that Hamilton referred to both gold and silver coins, not merely silver. That is because it was precisely at this time that Congress began to consider a bimetallic coinage. In retrospect, this was a mistake, for throughout history, bimetallism has never worked well very long. It always has led to confusion and ultimately the disappearance as money of one of the metals. This is because there is always a subtle shifting of the relative values between gold and silver, or any other two metals for that matter, depending on constantly changing supply and demand. We may set a value ratio of one to the other that is quite acceptable today, but eventually that ratio will no longer reflect reality. The metal which grows in value over the other will be hoarded or possibly even melted down because it will bring a higher price as metal than it will as money. That is precisely what happened in the early days of our republic. It was determined after careful analysis of the free market that the value of gold at that time was approximately 15 times the value of silver. The Coinage Act of 1792 accordingly set the relative value of gold to silver at 15 to 1. It then authorized the federal government to mint gold coins called eagles, and it specified that their value was $10. In other words, the gold coins would be equal in value to 10 silver coins. 10 silver coins, each of 371.25 grains of fine silver, would contain a total of 3,712.5 grains. The content of the eagle, therefore, was 1/15 that amount, or 247.5 grains of fine gold. Contrary to popular misconception, Congress did not create a quote gold dollar. It didn't do that until 57 years later in the Coinage Act of 1849. In fact, it reaffirmed that, quote, the money of the account of the United States shall be expressed in dollars or units, unquote. And again, defined those units as coins containing 371.25 grains of pure silver. What Congress did do was authorize the minting of a gold coin and arbitrarily fix the value of the gold in that coin at 15 times the value of the dollar. And it also stated that all silver and gold coins produced in the federal mint were to be legal tender in accordance with their value, based on weight and purity relative to the standard of the silver dollar. Oh, yes, another thing. It set the death penalty for anyone who debases the nation's coinage. Wow, that's a pretty hefty penalty. The law, which if enforced today, would wipe out the House of Representatives, the Senate, the managerial level of the Treasury Department, and the presidency as well. Wow, that's very interesting. Free coinage. Perhaps the most important provision of this act, however, was the establishment of what is called free coinage. Under free coinage, any citizen may take raw silver or gold to the mint and, for a nominal fee, have it converted into coins for personal use. The government merely performs a technical function of creating the coin and stamping it with its insignia to certify the correct weight and purity. The state's role in this is exactly the same as inspecting the scales in a grocery store or the meter on a gasoline pump. It is merely fulfilling the constitutional requirement to set standards and verify the accuracy of weights and measures. Free coinage was to become an important part of the American success story, and it lasted until the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, which not only terminated it, but even made it illegal for citizens to possess gold. We shall take a closer look at that dismal period in a later section, but for now it is important to recall the greatness of our monetary system as it once was. Elgin Roseclose explains, quote, the sound the principle of free coinage has proved its practical worth as a deterrent to debasement and depreciation. Where coinage is on private accounts, there is no profit to the state in tampering with the standard, and there is no opportunity for such practice by the individual. The circulation of coins of similar appearance and domination, uh, sorry, um, let's try that again. Um, yeah, I'm a little cross-eyed today. I think I need more coffee. Okay. The principle Okay, sorry about that. Ugh, a little distracted there. The principle of free coinage has proved its practical worth as a deterrent to debasement and depreciation. Where coinage is on private account, there is no profit to the state in tampering with the standard, and there is no opportunity for such practice by the individual. The circulation of coins of similar appearance and denomination, but of uncertain standard, the arbitrary and unpredictable modifications in the standard by autocratic government, the temptations to profit, which were constantly dangled before despotic rulers, these were evils which had perplexed and harassed society and hindered the national growth of economy since the days when coin money first appeared. By a stroke, they were swept away. At the same time, the institution of free coinage, by giving stability and character to one of the chief instruments of organized economy, made possible a more vigorous and healthy commercial life and gave prestige and increased substance to the government adopting it. And that quote was from Gross Close, Money and Man, page 167. Sound money and economic prosperity. This was indeed an auspicious beginning for the new nation, and the result was immediately observable in an upsurge in prosperity. In December 16, 1789 edition of the Pennsylvania Gazette declared, oh, I'm having trouble reading today. My mouth feels like it's stuck with a lot of cotton. I think I have to do the mouth exercises like the singers do before they sing, right? All right, let's try this again. Sound money and economic prosperity. This was indeed an auspicious beginning for the new nation, and the result was immediately observable in an upsurge in prosperity. The December 16, 1789 edition of the Pennsylvania Gazette declared, quote, since the federal constitution has removed all danger of our having a paper tender, our trade is advanced 50%. And that quote was quoted by Saucy, interesting name, Saucy, page 36. But that was just the beginning. Historian Douglas North says that, quote, the years 1793 to 1808 were years of unparalleled prosperity. And that quote was from Douglas C. North, The Economic Growth of the United States, New York, W. W. Norton, 1966, page 53. Lewis Hacker describes the period as one, quote, of unexampled business expansion, one of the greatest, in fact, the United States has had. The exports of the country mounted from $19 million in 1791 to $93 million in 1801. And that quote was from Lewis M. Hacker, American Capitalism, New York, Anvil, 1957, page 39. Furthermore, the federal deficit, which amounted to 28% of expenditures in 1792, dropped to 21% in 1795. By 1802, the deficit had disappeared altogether and had been replaced by a surplus that was almost as large as the government's total spending. George Washington watched this economic miracle with great satisfaction, and in correspondence to his friend Lafayette, the French statesman and former general in the Continental Army, Washington commented, our country, my dear sir, quote, our country, my dear sir, is fast progressing in its political importance and social happiness, unquote. In a letter to Catherine Macaulay Graham, he said, quote, the United States enjoys a sense of prosperity and tranquility under the new government that could hardly have been hoped for, end quote. And in a letter to the American poet and diplomat David Humphreys, Washington exclaimed, quote, our public credit stands on that high ground, which 3 years ago it would have been considered as a species of madness to have foretold, end quote. And those quotes are from, these letters were written in 1790 and 1791, quoted by Atwood, page 5 and 6. On the specific subject of paper money without backing by gold or silver, Washington wrote, "We may one day become a great commercial and flourishing nation. But if in the pursuit of the means we should unfortunately stumble again on unfunded paper money or any similar species of fraud, we shall assuredly give a fatal stab to our nation credit in its infancy." And that quote was from written in 1789, quoted by Louis Basso, treatise on monetary reform, St. Louis, Missouri, Monetary Realist Society, 1982, page 5. This then was the monetary blueprint laid down by the men who drafted our Constitution. In retrospect, about the only flaw one can find was the attempt to set a fixed ratio between the value of gold and silver. Rather than placing a dollar value on a gold coin, the mint should have imprinted the gold value in terms of weight and fineness. The free market then would have assigned it an exchange value in terms of goods and services, and that automatically would have determined its correct monetary value as a ratio to the silver dollars, which were bidding for the purchase of the same items. It was inevitable, therefore, that soon after the $10 eagle was created, the value of gold over silver began to climb higher than the prescribed ratio of 15 to 1, and the eagle ceased to circulate. In later years, with the discovery of the great gold fields in California and Australia, the process reversed itself, and silver dollars disappeared from commerce. But even though the bimetallism led to a discrepancy between the actual conversion ratio and that which the government had prescribed, nonetheless, it took place in the open market and no one was greatly injured by the inconvenience. Through it all, there was just one standard: the defined silver content of a dollar. Furthermore, both the silver and gold coins were of intrinsic value and totally honest in their measure. No nation could do more for the prosperity of its citizens than that. Summary: the Constitution prohibits both the states and the federal government from issuing fiat money. This was the deliberate intent of the founding fathers, who had bitter experience with fiat money before and especially during the Revolutionary War. In response to the need to have a precisely defined national monetary unit, Congress adopted the Spanish dollar, then currently in use, and defined the content of that dollar to be 371.25 grains of pure silver. With the development of a federal mint, American silver dollars were issued in accordance with that standard, and gold eagles also were produced, which were then equal to value in 10 silver dollars. Most importantly, free coinage was established, wherein Americans were able to convert their raw silver and gold into national coins officially certified by the government as to their intrinsic value. The product of these measures was a period of sound money and great economic prosperity, a period that would come to an end only when the next generation of Americans forgot to read their history. Ah, very important. History is very important. And return to the use of paper money and quote bills of credit. The monetary plan laid down by the founding fathers was the product of collective genius. Nowhere in history can one find so many men in one legislative body who understood the fraud inherent in fiat money and the hidden taxation nature of inflation. There was never such an assembly of scholars and statesmen determined to set a safe course for the action. Oh my gosh. Okay. I need more coffee. Let's read that sentence again. There was never such an assembly of scholars and statesmen determined to set a safe course for the nation of their own creation. Ay, holy moly. Okay. Literally, they handed us a treasure map. All we had to do was follow it to economic security and national prosperity. But as we shall see in the following sections, that map was discarded when the lessons of history died out with those who had lived it. And this is the end of chapter 15. Wow. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. We're moving quite along. I think we're about halfway through the book. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. And we'll continue next week with a new chapter. In the meantime, like I said, check out all our book clubs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and of course Thursdays for the financial book club. Check out our newsletters and podcasts on our website, as well as our merch and our healing center if you are local in the Los Angeles area. And I'll have all those links in the description box below. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great day. Okay, bye-bye now.